After killing the 3 men in the cave, Kevin went to a hotel, choosing not to go back to the competitor's village. In the middle of the night, several people tried to assassinate him in his sleep. When the leader of the group said that Brent Ottinger had sent them, Kevin suddenly questioned whether all 3 of the men were truly dead. After briefly considering whether one of them had survived, Kevin came to the conclusion that the real Brent Ottinger had actually yet to show his face. The truth is always so funny. When you think everything's settled, something unexpected will definitely happen. Although Kevin didn't have a deep understanding of which man was the real Brent Ottinger, he killed all of them regardless of whether they were real or fake. But if what these people said was true, then there was only one possibility left. The real Brent Ottinger had never appeared in front of him in the first place. All the Brent Ottingers Kevin had already gotten rid of were dummies, intended to distract him. Thinking of this, Kevin's breathing couldn't help but become rapid. He knew that Brent Ottinger was just an eye in the darkness of the secluded valley. He definitely wasn't a high-ranking figure. But if such a minor player had such a scheming mind, then what kind of terrifying existence would the real leaders be? After thinking about this, Kevin didn't even dare to think about what would come next because it was simply too scary to consider. Seeing Kevin, who was motionless and deep in thought, the dozen or so assassins didn't give him time to react. The leader of the men decisively gave the order, and he was the first to wave the knife in his hand and slash at Kevin. When the sharp knife was less than 6 inches away from Kevin's head, Kevin's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly raised his right hand and grabbed the knife with his index and middle fingers. At the same time, his fingers moved quickly on the edge of the knife. In a breath, he grabbed the man's wrist. What happened next seemed almost effortless for Kevin. The difference in strength between the 2 men was just too great. Kevin did not want to leave any chance for these people to survive. They were destined to become lambs to be slaughtered. A few minutes later, all of their corpses lay scattered on the floor around Kevin. Blood stained most of the carpet and furniture in the hotel room. This scene alone would make any ordinary person feel terrified and disgusted. However, Kevin's expression did not change. He dialed Stanley Cooper's number and calmly told him the address and the details of what had just unfolded. He asked Stanley to send a few people from the Reaper Squad to clean up the place. Soon, Kevin left the hotel. He did not choose to take a car, but instead walked slowly toward the direction of Herbalist City. In his mind, he had been thinking about the problem with Brent Ottinger. If this matter was not resolved, he knew that it would become a thorn stuck in his side. For the Herbalist Society and the contestants, today was an important day. The big competition venue was filled with people, but they were all members of the Herbalist Society. From the ordinary herbalist to the higher-ups of the organization, they had all come. They were all intent on witnessing today's competition with their own eyes. In order to guard against any problems occurring during the competition, the Herbalist Society deployed a total of 1,000 guards to surround the entire pill refinement venue, both inside and outside. It was to prevent any unfortunate incidents, but also to keep ordinary people from coming to watch the competition. All 6 gates leading into Herbalist City were closed to the general public. On the high platform, the chairman of the Herbalist Society sat looking over the arena. He leaned back in his chair and, with his right index finger, gently spun the ring on his thumb. Even the proud Vincent Reeves could only obey his every order. This person was the true ruler of the Herbalist Society.
"How is everything going?"
the man asked in a low voice. The man's voice seemed to contain a special kind of spiritual energy that made people feel oddly refreshed. Vincent Reeves respectfully lowered his head slightly and replied,
"Everything has been arranged. No matter what happens, we can control it in short order. The rules have been explained to the contestants, right?"
The man glanced at him and asked.
"Everything has been communicated clearly,"
Vincent Reeves said with a serious expression. The man did not ask any more questions. He did not speak at all. The higher-ups of the Herbalist Society gathered around him were all completely silent as well. Vincent Reeves had been a legendary expert for decades. Everyone in the Herbalist Society treated him as a god. His reputation had already surpassed nearly everyone who had come before him, but he still had nothing but respect for this man. As the man looked out at the competition venue, there weren't that many participants today. There were only 12 people in total. To be able to stand here today, they had already proven themselves to be extremely capable.
Sir, there is still half an hour before the competition begins. Would you like to say a few words?
Vincent Reeves asked. Given the occasion, even though Vincent Reeves was the commissioner of the competition, he realized that he was not the main character today. He would definitely not take the initiative to begin the proceedings without his boss's permission. There was an unwritten rule that was known to everyone in the Herbalist Society. As long as the chairman was present, everyone followed his lead.
I'll say a few words, the man said.
In the next second, he stood up and took a slight step forward toward the edge of the platform. His speed was so fast that everyone on the platform, including Vincent Reeves, was impressed. He said,
"The herbalism competition has always been one of the most important things in the Herbalist Society. To be honest, I am very happy to see more than 10 of you standing on the stage here today. As the saying goes, geniuses come from every generation. If the Herbalist Society wants to continue its dominance, it will require many more generations of young geniuses. I know that some of you aren't from the Herbalist Society, not yet at least, but this isn't a problem. We can be good friends even if we aren't family. The doors of the Herbalist Society are always open to you."
The man's voice wasn't loud, but it was clearly heard by everyone. For a moment, the entire place was boiling. Kevin noticed that the people in the arena were looking at the Herbalist Society's leader with burning eyes, as if hearing him speak in person had been the greatest event of their entire lives. Unfortunately, the heavens did not agree. After a cool breeze blew over the arena, it started to drizzle. In the eyes of the audience, this cool weather was not bad, but it was definitely not ideal for refining pills. But before anyone could react, the massive roof of the arena began to close. As others turned their attention to the roof as it slowly slid into place, the chairman of the Herbalist Society seemed to have noticed Kevin's gaze as he looked at him with his eyes lowered. The distance between the two of them was at least 100 feet. But still, when the man's gaze fell upon him, Kevin felt as if his line of sight had been ripped apart. He couldn't see anything clearly in front of him, and his mind went completely blank. When he recovered after a moment, he found that his back was drenched in sweat and his face was pale. "What just happened to you?" Olivia, who was standing by his side, asked, noticing that something was wrong with Kevin. She frowned as she stared at him. Nothing. Kevin waved his hands twice, but he couldn't help gasping for breath. The conversation between the two was clearly seen by Mason Zimmerman. The jealousy in his heart immediately rose. After being so clearly rejected by Olivia Rafferty countless times right out in the open, it surprised even Mason that he still had a heart full of love for her. Especially after knowing that Olivia and Kevin had been staying in the same room together, the dignified young heir of the Zimmerman family, who was known as one of the top herbalism experts of his generation in Washington, D.C., and across the country, had peered out his window pitifully many times each night. He had an entire luxurious villa, and he still sat by the window trying to get a glimpse of the situation inside the little converted storage room next door. Mason Zimmerman, who had been paying close attention to Olivia Rafferty since the moment they stepped into the arena, gazed at the woman he loved and simmered with anger because she was next to Kevin and not next to him. The chairman of the Herbalist Society opened the next round of the competition after speaking to an audience who took note of his power. Even Kevin, who locked eyes with the chairman as a drizzle came down, lost his focus and found himself gasping for air. Olivia's concern for Kevin kept her close to him as the competition began, much to the anger of Mason Zimmerman, who continued to love her despite being rejected many times. Still, this was a competition held by the Herbalist Society. Although the Zimmerman family was certainly powerful, especially in Washington, D.C., Mason knew that he had to remain focused on the task at hand. If he didn't perform, he knew that his parents and grandparents would definitely not let him off lightly when he returned home after the competition. Therefore, Mason could only grit his teeth and wait for the competition to begin. He would prove to Olivia who the real herbalism genius was. Mason Zimmerman was full of confidence. He knew what pill formula he had obtained from his family, and how much he had spent to buy the herbs necessary to refine it. After the chairman of the Herbalist Society announced the start of the competition, all 12 contestants began to prepare their ingredients.
Commissioner Reeves, who do you think will win the final contest today?
The chairman asked Vincent Reeves after he returned to his seat on the high platform. Vincent Reeves stood at his side respectfully. It was not only he who was standing. There were more than 40 higher-ups from the Herbalist Society on the high platform to watch the contest. Apart from the chairman of the Herbalist Society, none of the others had chairs, so they could only stand behind him respectfully. No one in the Herbalist Society would dare to sit on the same level as he. Vincent Reeves pursed his lips and said in a deep voice,
I wouldn't underestimate any of them. The young people nowadays are not what we could compare with in the past. All of them are more than capable. I think today's competition will be exceptionally exciting.
Vincent Reeves's mind was like a clean mirror. How could he not see what the chairman of the Herbalist Society was thinking?
But I think there must be someone in your heart that you think most highly of, right?
The man looked at Vincent meaningfully and asked,
I do have someone that I think particularly highly of,
Vincent said as he subconsciously lowered his head. The surrounding higher-ups clearly noticed that his forehead was covered with sweat.
Mason Zimmerman has quite a reputation in Washington, D.C. He is reputed to be one of the top contenders in this competition.
Oh, is he the only one?
The man raised his eyebrows and asked.
Apart from Mason Zimmerman, Kevin Williams is also something of a dark horse. This man has been showing his talent since the beginning of the preliminary round. Every pill he refined has been extraordinary.
Larry Barnes suddenly took 2 steps forward and said,
It's been so many years since we last saw each other.
I didn't expect to see you here.
A smile suddenly appeared on the face of the man. He turned around and looked at Larry Barnes.
It's good to see you, sir. It's been a long time.
Larry Barnes replied respectfully.
The past is the past. People have to look forward, right? No matter what you have experienced up to this point, it doesn't matter. You are here now,
the man said. His expression didn't change much as he spoke.
Yes, sir,
Larry Barnes said. He clearly wanted to say something else, but in the end, he held it in. The other higher-ups on the platform looked at Larry Barnes as their eyes filled with surprise. Larry Barnes wasn't very popular among the higher-ups of the Herbalist Society. Most of them didn't have any respect for him considering his past failures in competitions and his lowly job running a stall at the market. Vincent Reeves and the others were well aware of this. Although the Herbalist Society clearly stated that internal conflicts were not allowed, no one was able to control the thoughts of others. Currently, a large share of the higher-ups around him were supporters of Clint Grayson. After Clint Grayson died that day, all his property had been transferred to the Herbalist Society. But today, the chairman of the Herbalist Society spoke to Larry Barnes in a calm and even caring tone. This caused the people of Clint Grayson's faction to silently seethe in anger and jealousy. Such a thing had never happened to Larry Barnes before.
I heard that Mr. Grayson's demise had a lot to do with the Kevin you just mentioned. Or did he fight for a chance to compete with you?
The chairman suddenly asked in a low voice. Hearing this, Larry Barnes quickly lowered his head and said,
Sir, I have no relationship with Kevin. He only came to my defense in the face of injustice, and I only helped him because of his rare talent.
Larry Barnes had wasted the past 20 years selling herbs in the Herbalist Society's internal trading market. However, he knew how the game was played. What the chairman of the Herbalist Society said just now had already aroused suspicion in him. If he didn't prove his innocence, his life would surely be in danger.
Don't worry. I was just speaking casually. Let's just watch the competition between these young people.
The 12 contestants had finished their final inspection work, and each of them took out the medicinal herbs that they had prepared. Among them, Mason Zimmerman immediately stole the limelight because the medicinal herbs that he took out were rare even among the inner market of the Herbalist Society, let alone in the outside world. What the hell? Is that the 1,000-year snow lotus? After recognizing the pink herbs in Mason Zimmerman's hand, one of the people in the audience stood up from his chair and exclaimed in shock. Several murmurs broke out throughout the crowd as most of the people turned their attention toward Mason Zimmerman. This kid is really well prepared, Kevin muttered with a face full of surprise. He had seen the herbs that Mason Zimmerman had prepared before. There was obviously nothing that had compared to a top-grade medicinal herb like the 1,000-year snow lotus. Mason Zimmerman let out a muffled groan. He was obviously enjoying this moment of attention.
Kevin, I am the man who deserves to stand by Olivia's side. Only I can give her the life she wants. I am going to be the champion of this competition, and after that I will win her heart,
Mason Zimmerman said as he glared at Kevin and then looked up at the sky. His voice could be heard across most of the arena. Those who heard him had different expressions on their faces. Wow, that was so romantic, one of the onlookers said. If I were Olivia, I would definitely be flattered, someone else said. Discussions erupted throughout the arena like a tsunami, but Olivia Rafferty was not as happy and moved as the audience imagined she would be. Instead, her face became very gloomy, and she did not even look at the arrogant Mason Zimmerman. Olivia's father's face up on the high platform had already turned ashen. If it were not for the venue, he would have rushed down and slapped Mason Zimmerman across the face right then and there. However, the chairman of the Herbalist Society simply laughed softly and shook his head helplessly.
It is as you said, Commissioner Reeves. Young people nowadays truly are a different breed.
Sir, my daughter and the young man from the Zimmerman family have absolutely no relationship. They barely even know each other, Michael Rafferty said as he leaned forward in a serious manner.
Don't think too much about it. I don't mind,
the man said softly. He just smiled and shook his head. Hearing this, everyone on the scene couldn't help but feel nervous, especially Michael Rafferty, who was trembling slightly. Although the chairman of the Herbalist Society seemed calm on the surface, everyone knew that a man like he didn't need to lift a finger to destroy anyone. All it would take was a look or a nod toward one of his subordinates. The only one who wasn't affected too much by the scene was Kevin. He just remained focused, handling the herbs in his hands with care and placing them into the furnace in front of him. Controlling the flame to revolve slowly around the interior of the furnace, it began to rotate and burn. From afar, it looked like 5 fire snakes were circling around the bottom of the furnace. Is that a fire controlling technique? One of the higher-ups on the platform said in surprise as he turned his attention toward Kevin. All of a sudden, all of the higher-ups turned their eyes to Kevin. As experienced herbalists, they had more or less grasped some methods to control the flame, but most of them only controlled the size of the flame, not the rotation around the furnace. For most of them, the way Kevin casually controlled the flames was something they had never seen in their lives. There was a growing sense among the higher-ups that what they were witnessing was an herbalism genius. As the competition was about to begin, Mason Zimmerman made a grand announcement about winning the competition and in turn winning Olivia Rafferty's heart, leading to much embarrassment for both Olivia and her father. Meanwhile, Kevin was quietly organizing the herbs he would be using, and then initiated a breathtaking fire-controlling technique under his pill furnace, drawing the attention and admiration of all of the higher-ups of the Herbalist Society. Despite everything that had happened, no one would have thought that Kevin was capable of such an advanced technique. The chairman of the Herbalist Society frowned as he looked at Kevin from a distance. A complicated expression flashed across his eyes, but no one noticed it. At the same time, Vincent Reeves could not help but feel surprised when he saw this. But there was also a look of appreciation in his eyes. He knew that Kevin's skills were beyond what anyone expected, and this competition was where he was going to reveal them to the most important members of the Herbalist Society. He was different from the other higher-ups of the Herbalist Society. When Kevin was still in Chicago, he had demonstrated his fire-controlling technique in a pill refining competition. When Vincent received the news, he even sent someone to meet with Kevin and try to learn more about him. During this period of time, there were some unpleasant things that had happened, which caused Kevin's impression of the Herbalist Society to sink quite low. But now, from Vincent Reeves's perspective, the more things Kevin knew, the better it was for his own prospects. No one knew how badly Vincent Reeves really wanted to eliminate Kevin from the picture in the beginning. But since then, he had conducted a series of investigations into Kevin. No one would have guessed that the dignified commissioner of the Herbalist Society competition, Vincent Reeves, had secretly been following Kevin for quite some time. From the Murphy family's mansion to the Orion Group, and then to the outskirts of the city to meet Brent Ottinger just last night. He had witnessed all of Kevin's recent moves and performances. In other people's eyes, they might think that Kevin had started a war with the Kessler family purely on impulse, but Vincent Reeves had seen his true reasons and intentions. Kevin never acted or reacted for any evil reason, and instead used his skills and his money to further good. Because of that, Kevin quickly developed his standing among Washington's elites in a shockingly short period of time. He had advanced in both business and politics at the same time, far exceeding Vincent's expectations. By this point, Vincent Reeves was confident that, although he had seen many outstanding talents among the next generation, Kevin stood in a league of his own. He knew with certainty that he had never met a young man like Kevin Williams. With his strength and his quickly accumulating resources and connections, it was no exaggeration to say that the sky was the limit for Kevin. Therefore, Vincent Reeves had already made a shocking decision in his heart. Although he did not know what the chairman of the Herbalist Society was thinking when it came to Kevin, he wanted to make a big investment in him after the end of this competition, regardless of whether he emerged victorious or not. But these were just Vincent Reeves's own thoughts. He still hadn't expressed them to anyone out loud, let alone the chairman of the Herbalist Society. At that moment, when Kevin used the fire-controlling technique, the surrounding furnaces of the other contestants were affected to various extents. What the hell? What the hell is going on here? The roof is closed, so there's obviously no wind. Why is my flame always drifting off to the right like that? One of the other contestants said. It's the same for me. How am I supposed to only use one side of the furnace to refine my pill? Another said in frustration.
What's going on here? I've been refining pills for my whole life and I've never encountered anything like this.
A third contestant complained aloud. In an instant, everyone in the arena began to complain and comment on the situation unfolding in front of them in surprise. Mason Zimmerman had just placed a medicinal ingredient into the furnace when he felt the flames under his furnace start to stir wildly and completely out of his control. However, he had already realized that almost everyone's flame was having problems, and it began just after Kevin started his fire-controlling technique. The deviation of every one of the flames was heading in the direction of Kevin.
Could it be that this guy is using some kind of shady method to disrupt every other furnace?
Mason Zimmerman thought to himself. However, he soon buried his thought in the back of his mind. This was a competition held by the Herbalist Society after all. If Kevin really did do something that was out of the ordinary, and especially something that was against the rules, it would be impossible that the higher-ups on the platform wouldn't notice it and take action. The 5 fingers on Kevin's left hand, which were controlling the flame, moved quickly. The fire twisted at a speed invisible to the naked eye. The flames attached themselves to the surface of the cauldron and spiraled non-stop. The effect was mesmerizing. At the same time, Kevin swiftly threw all of the medicinal ingredients that he had prepared into the furnace. The corners of the mouths of some of the higher-ups on the tall platform could not help but twitch a few times when they saw this scene.
This kid is doing it again? Back in the preliminary round, it was because of this move that his furnace exploded, one of them whispered. Let's make preparations. Later, if the furnace explodes again, we need to make sure the other contestants are protected, someone replied.
Vincent Reeves frowned when he heard these discussions. However, the chairman of the Herbalist Society just looked at Kevin with great interest and did not panic despite his actions. Time passed quickly. The competition had reached its most exciting moment. During this period of time, many people failed to refine a pill, although there were no explosions. However, due to the temperature of their flames not being controlled properly, the medicinal ingredients within many of their furnaces had been charred beyond recognition. The time of the competition was not up yet, but with the conditions being difficult and with tensions running high, everyone knew that there would be no second chances if they failed now.
Someone is about to successfully refine a pill,
the chairman of the Herbalist Society said indifferently as he looked at the remaining 7 people in the competition.
It looks like it's Mason Zimmerman. He looks to be on the verge of one of the best grade 8 medicinal pills, the Snowface pill. This kind of pill not only has the effect of retaining one's appearance into old age, but also the effect of maintaining one's youthful energy for far longer than is natural.
Vincent Reeves detailed the name and effect of the medicinal pill that Mason Zimmerman was working on as Mason worked his furnace. The chairman of the Herbalist Society murmured, seemingly disagreeing with Vincent Reeves but not saying anything else. Vincent Reeves gritted his teeth and remained quiet. A low-tier grade 8 pill might cause a lot of commotion in the outside world, but it would not necessarily be enough to win this competition.
Haha, Kevin. I don't care if you have millions of tricks up your sleeves. I'm going to refine a grade 8 pill any second now. I will definitely be the champion of this competition,
Mason Zimmerman said excitedly as he threw his head back and laughed. As he glanced over at Mason's furnace, Kevin was slightly shocked. He had heard of this pill before, but it was rumored that it had been lost in the long river of history many years ago. He didn't expect such knowledge to be in the hands of the Zimmerman family. Just as Kevin was thinking about this, Olivia's furnace started to groan and creak and rumble.
Olivia!
Mason Zimmerman shouted nervously. Kevin also started to worry. After all, Olivia's power base was not that high. It was very possible that she wouldn't survive an explosion. Olivia's face turned pale. However, no matter what happened, she did not regret being able to participate in the competition and reach this stage today. She had already proved to the people in her family, including her father, that she was worthy of their respect.
Is this the Rafferty girl? She is a rare talent at such a young age. I never knew that Mr. Rafferty had such a talented daughter,
the chairman of the Herbalist Society said as a look of praise flashed across his eyes. Michael Rafferty didn't say anything, but instead simply responded with a smile, then turned his head with a mixture of pride and anxiety to look at his daughter. He was surprised to be proud after so many years of dismissing Olivia's talents, but he was worried that he was also now afraid her furnace would explode and possibly kill Olivia before he could praise her. As Mason Zimmerman was on the verge of refining a grade 8 medicinal pill, he and Kevin both noticed that Olivia's furnace had started to rumble. Olivia still managed to attract the attention of the Herbalist Society's chairman, who commented favorably on her performance up to this point. Olivia's father smiled proudly as he looked down on his daughter, whom he had always doubted, but he was also filled with a sense of anxiety. Everyone knew that if her furnace exploded, she would likely be gravely injured. Still, Michael Rafferty couldn't help but be proud of how far his daughter had come in this competition. It wasn't just today. To be honest, Olivia's performance throughout the competition had already far exceeded Michael Rafferty's wildest expectations. The Rafferty family was fairly well known in both Washington, D.C. and within the Herbalist Society. Michael Rafferty himself was doing pretty well for himself. He held a fairly high position within the Herbalist Society and had a distinguished career with more room for growth. Everyone also knew that Michael had 2 daughters. The older daughter was always considered to be something of a prodigy within the halls of the Herbalist Society. When she wasn't even 10 years old, she had already displayed such a rare and astonishing talent for herbalism that she was accepted as a student of an extremely talented expert in the upper realm. This had been the proudest moment of Michael Rafferty's life. In his heart, he always knew that his oldest daughter was destined for great things. When held up in comparison to her older sister, Olivia had always been considered to be mediocre at best in the eyes of her father. In truth, Michael Rafferty had never paid much attention to his younger daughter. Her approach to herbalism had always been what he considered to be unorthodox and even rebellious. She was never content with the answer she was given about why certain herbs behaved one way while others behaved another way. Therefore, after Olivia expressed an interest in participating in the competition, Michael tried his best to stop her. Initially, he thought that she was just throwing some kind of tantrum in an attempt to get attention, and he was sure that she would be eliminated in short order. He was most concerned about her embarrassing him. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that his daughter would make it all the way to the finals, and even be on the verge of successfully refining a medicinal pill that surpasses the 7th grade. To be able to achieve such a result would have been a stretch even for Michael's older daughter, let alone for Olivia. Looking down at Olivia as she refused to give up, Michael's brows gradually knitted together. He suddenly realized that all these years, he had never truly understood or appreciated his second daughter. Everything about her had been shrouded in the shadow of his older daughter. It was not until today that his understanding of his daughter completely bloomed. If he started to appreciate her skills and focus on nurturing Olivia's herbalism path now, perhaps in the future, she could reach incredible heights in this world. Of course, these were only the thoughts that were running through Michael Rafferty's mind. The specifics of what to do next would depend on what Olivia did in the next few minutes. "Olivia, give up! If your furnace explodes, you could seriously be hurt. It's not worth the risk." Mason Zimmerman had already pulled the pill he had refined out of his furnace and turned to loudly warn Olivia. "It wasn't as easy for me to get to this point as it was for you. Regardless of whether I can win or not, I will not give up." Olivia gritted her teeth and replied stubbornly. Her face was extremely pale. The relatively low amount of spiritual energy emitted from her body would be shattered by an explosion in an instant. "If you continue to hold on, your life will be in danger," Mason shouted anxiously. "Even if I die here today, I will definitely not give up." Olivia's hand shook as she continued working on the pill. Just as Mason was wondering whether he should rush over to her or not, the pill furnace that Kevin was working with suddenly emitted a beam of light that was formed of 5 different colors. The beam of light shot straight up into the sky and broke through the retractable roof. It embedded itself into the thick layer of the dark clouds overhead. In the next second, the rolling dark clouds in the sky suddenly stopped, Then they started to revolve around the light beam at a visible speed. Their speed became faster and faster, forming an ominous vortex in the sky. Olivia and the others were in awe. A 5-colored light pillar? Kevin is refining the Great 5 Elemental Pill, a higher-up of the Herbalist Society muttered under his breath, as he couldn't help but step forward and gaze at the sky in amazement.
That's a top-tier grade 8 pill,
Vincent Reeves said out loud as his face also revealed a shocked expression. All of the higher-ups of the Herbalist Society were stunned. They couldn't believe what they were seeing in front of them. Among this group of senior herbalists, there were very few who had ever heard of this before. Although the Great 5 Elemental Pill wasn't as powerful as some of the other pills that Kevin had refined before, it was certainly more rare than any of the others. As far as anyone knew, this pill hadn't been refined in decades, and its formula had been kept a secret from everyone except the highest people within the Herbalist Society. No one had ever thought that such a precious pill would appear in a competition among young experts like this. The vortex in the sky was spinning faster and faster. Olivia almost fell to the ground and fainted. Luckily, Mason had gotten to her side just in time to steady her. But only now did he recognize that the pill Olivia was refining was the ethereal pill. It was listed as a middle grade tier 8 medicinal pill. Kevin, who had been silent all this time, slowly raised his head to look at the sky. His expression was unusually solemn. The sky was getting darker and darker. Under the swirl of the vortex, the dark clouds became heavier and heavier. It was as if the sky was about to collapse, and it gave people a sense of crisis as the black clouds pressed down on the arena and the entirety of Herbalist City. Everything felt as if violence would erupt at any second. But although the sky looked dark and dangerous on the surface, it was actually only the calm before the storm. The 5-colored pillar of light slowly disappeared, but the vortex in the sky remained. For a moment, the people in the audience didn't know what to think. Many of them weren't sure if Kevin had succeeded or failed. Many of them pointed at Kevin and then at the sky. Kevin's gaze remained on the sky, seemingly in a daze. Just as they were getting more and more certain that things were calming down, a dull yet loud sound suddenly exploded in the sky. Before anyone could react, they could only hear the continuous sound of thunder coming from the sky, as if a pile of fireworks had exploded in the sky.
Activate the protective shield over the audience seats.
The chairman of the Herbalist Society looked at the sky and quickly issued an order. A milky white light slowly rose from the surroundings, covering all of the audience seats like a waterfall. No one knew what was going on. Then, a thick 5-colored bolt of lightning fell from the sky as if it wanted to destroy everything on the ground. Vincent Reeves was just about to mobilize his own spiritual energy in an effort to help Kevin, but he was stopped by the chairman of the Herbalist Society right before he could make a move.
Sir, this is the legendary 5-colored lightning. Kevin's current power base is not high enough to be able to withstand this. If we don't intervene, he could die.
Vincent Reeves said anxiously.
Don't worry. Kevin should be able to withstand it,
the man said with a solemn expression.
Sir, please, this is a matter of life and death. The strength of the lightning will be highly unpredictable. It is not something that should be left to chance,
Vincent Reeves said anxiously.
If I say that we will let it play out, then we will let it play out.
The chairman of the Herbalist Society coldly glanced at him and said. Vincent did not dare to move when he heard this. He stood where he was and looked anxiously at Kevin. No one could believe what they were seeing. Today, the legendary 5-colored lightning actually appeared right in front of their eyes. This was definitely something that no one had expected when the competition began today, and certainly, no one would have expected Kevin to be the one who was able to refine it. Amid the exploding furnaces of the competition, a light pillar slowly disappeared, leaving the spectators unsure whether Kevin had succeeded in refining the Great Five Elemental Pill, until they saw a five-colored lightning bolt about to fall from the sky. While Vincent was able to activate the protective shield over the audience area, the chairman of the Herbalist Society stopped him from using his own spiritual energy to protect Kevin. Despite Vincent's concerns for Kevin's safety, the chairman believed that he would be able to withstand its power. When the five-colored lightning descended from the sky, Kevin gathered all the spiritual energy in his body and formed a defensive wall in front of him. Despite this, he never expected the power of the five-colored lightning to be so strong, almost instantly cracking the surface of his spiritual energy barrier. As soon as the scattered lightning bolt struck the surrounding pill furnaces, they all exploded into pieces in the blink of an eye. Unfortunately for those contestants, they could only blame this on bad luck. If they had been faster like Mason Zimmerman and a handful of other contestants, they would have finished refining their pills even before Kevin. But now the competition for them was ending in failure, since the basic form of their pills was still inside their pill furnaces when they were instantly shattered by lightning. This meant that those herbalists had officially been eliminated from this stage of the competition. Fortunately, the senior members of the Herbalist Society had acted in time and managed to bring those contestants away from the middle of the arena to safety. Given that the five-colored lightning had not appeared in many years, no one knew what kind of powerful force it contained. Just then, another bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck Kevin's spiritual energy barrier, breaking through the wall like a hot knife cutting through butter. Due to the toll that it had taken on his strength, Kevin's face turned pale all of a sudden. He spat out a mouthful of blood and took 5 or 6 steps back while gasping for breath. While Kevin was about to be consumed by the lightning, a figure jumped down from the high platform with lightning speed and appeared in front of him. One hand held his shoulder, while the other hand emitted a dark purple light to resist the power of the five-colored lightning.
This is too dangerous, kid. We need to get out of here quickly.
Vincent Reeves urged Kevin with a serious expression. Kevin tried his best to open his mouth, but he couldn't even say a word. It wasn't that he didn't want to speak, but the power of the lightning was just too great. It shocked all the nerves in his body until they became numb. At the same time, his hair stood up and released some smoke. His face was also covered in dust. Although he didn't look like he was in good shape, and from the outside his appearance even looked somewhat comical, no one present dared to make fun of him. After all, what right did the others have to laugh at him for attracting the five-colored lightning? Mason Zimmerman, who had already retreated to the edge of the arena and was carrying the unconscious Olivia Rafferty in his arms, fixed his eyes on Kevin. Only now did he realize just how big the gap was between him and this man whom he had always considered to be his rival for Olivia's heart. No wonder Olivia chose him. Mason Zimmerman's lips moved slightly, speaking in a soft voice that only he could hear.
What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get out of here.
Vincent saw that Kevin did not move and couldn't help but become angry. My whole body is numb and I can't move at all. Kevin used a lot of strength as he struggled to say a few words. The moment he felt the power of the five-colored lightning, Kevin had already wanted to leave the arena, but he soon found out that the situation wasn't something he could control. With his entire body filled with purple light, Vincent Reeves frowned even more tightly upon hearing this. He originally wanted to push Kevin away with his hands, but before he could reach out with his hand, he instantly realized that there was a problem. The five-colored lightning was continuously absorbing all the spiritual energy that he emitted. At this moment, he was like a nail that had been pinned to the ground. Like Kevin, it was as if the five-colored lightning was a rope that fell from the sky and wrapped around him, making him unable to move at all.
This lightning is truly astonishing,
Vincent uttered very seriously. He had attracted many different kinds of lightning from concocting pills for dozens of years. However, this was the first time he had encountered a situation where lightning could absorb other people's spiritual energy. Just then, a pale white light suddenly appeared on the high platform and condensed into a light pillar that shot diagonally toward the vortex of dark clouds in the sky. A second later, a muffled sound rang out as the thick and heavy dark clouds in the sky were instantly pushed back. The falling bolts of lightning also quickly disappeared without a trace. When the dust on the ground of the herbalism arena finally settled, the people present found that Vincent Reeves's body was half hunched, and his entire body was covered in dust. Moreover, he was breathing heavily, as if he had just been fished out of the water after almost drowning. At the same time, a golden pill quietly floated in the air, emitting a bright light, and a rich medicinal fragrance drifted out from within.
The pill refinement competition has officially ended. I don't need to say anything about who has won the championship.
The chairman stood at the edge of the high platform and was clearly looking at Kevin, who was standing in the middle of the arena. It was he who had dispersed the dark clouds in the sky and stopped the five-colored lightning from dealing any further damage. However, no one noticed that the chairman's right hand, which was inside his coat pocket, was trembling nonstop.
I have one more thing to announce. After discussing this with the other senior members of the Herbalist Society, the champion of this competition will also become an honorary senior member of the Herbalist Society.
After the chairman revealed this, he then turned to the old men in blue and white and said,
After Kevin recovers, have Commissioner Reeves bring him to see me.
Yes, Chairman. The two men in blue and white lowered their heads respectfully. When they raised their heads, the chairman had already disappeared. Like the other elders, the two of them then shifted their attention toward Kevin, who was half kneeling on the ground. While the chairman told everyone that this matter had been discussed with the senior members, there was no such thing that had taken place. It was just a reason for him to convince the crowd. However, who would dare to question the words and authority of the chairman of the Herbalist Society? Moreover, Kevin's pill refinement skills were something that everyone had just witnessed. Given that he was only in his late 20s now, if he was given another few decades to grow, how much more extraordinary would he become? On the surface, it seemed a little inappropriate to let such a young man become an honorary senior member of the Herbalist Society, but the others couldn't disagree with the fact that they would definitely benefit immensely from his undeniable talent. After being unconscious for an unknown period of time, when Kevin slowly opened his eyes, the first thing he smelled was the strong smell of cleaning fluid all over his body. "You're finally awake." Olivia stood up from the chair next to him in surprise. She quickly called over a dozen medical staff to check on Kevin, who then concluded that all his injuries had stabilized and that he only needed to rest. Why am I here? What's going on?" Kevin licked his dry lips as he slowly looked around in confusion. "Both of us were sent to the hospital right after the competition ended. When I woke up, Mason told me that you were declared the champion of the competition. Isn't that amazing?" Olivia explained as her worry quickly turned into joy. "How long was I unconscious?" Kevin gulped and asked. "For 3 whole days, the medical staff of the Herbalist Society were monitoring your situation. They said that your nerves were damaged by the 5-colored lightning, and your body was temporarily paralyzed because of it. Moreover, your spiritual energy has also been heavily depleted, so you can't take any pills recklessly. You can only wait until you have fully recovered from the lightning's effects." Olivia supported her chin with both hands and told him with a complicated look. "The 5-colored lightning? No wonder," Kevin muttered to himself. When he felt that he could not exert any strength from head to toe, He initially thought that it was because he was permanently paralyzed. Luckily, the lightning had only temporarily paralyzed his muscles. Kevin rolled over onto his side and immediately reached for his phone to call Lily. Back in New York City, Thomas Williams was sitting in the study of the Williams family's mansion, drinking coffee with an expressionless face. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps coming from outside quickly approached as Laura Williams walked in with their son Ethan. "You still have time to drink coffee? Do you know what happened?" Laura's face was full of panic as she swept the cup of coffee in front of Thomas Williams to the ground, instantly shattering it into pieces.
Of course I know. But what else do you want to do after what happened? No one can change what is destined to happen.
Thomas didn't feel annoyed at his wife's rudeness. He then quietly picked up a towel and wiped the spilled coffee on the table. How can you be so calm? Don't you remember how badly we treated Kevin before? Now that he's doing so well in DC, what if he comes back here to seek revenge on us in the future? Don't forget that you were one of the people who framed him in the first place. Laura was so anxious that she stomped her feet and flailed her arms. Although the finals of the Herbalist Society's competition prohibited all outsiders from watching in person, they made sure to live-stream the event so that everyone could still tune in to find out who eventually would be declared the champion. Only God knew that when she saw that Kevin was almost consumed by the bolts of lightning before ultimately winning the championship in the end, Laura Williams' heart was full of ups and downs. She was hoping that nobody would come in to save Kevin, so that he could just die in Washington, D.C.
Are you afraid?
Thomas Williams suddenly put down the towel in his hand and looked up at his wife. "Stop talking nonsense. You and I both know that Kevin's current power base is unfathomable. If he comes for revenge, who in the Williams family can stop him? Do you expect him to simply let us go on account of us being related?" she shouted.
Dad, Mama's right. Now we have to come up with a way to get us out of this mess,
Ethan Williams said. He was as anxious and worried about Kevin's rise as his mother's was. After all, he knew very well how unforgivable what their family had done to Kevin was. If the truth was exposed, no one would be able to escape if Kevin wanted to settle the score with them later on. Hearing this, Thomas Williams slowly got up and walked in front of his son. He then gave him a hard slap across the face. Now that he had a level 3 power base, his slap immediately knocked Ethan down to the ground, causing one of his son's teeth to fly out of his mouth along with some blood. When Ethan regained his senses, he looked at his father in a daze. He couldn't figure out if he had said or done something wrong to draw Thomas's anger.
What did I ever do to deserve a piece of trash like you as my son?
Thomas uttered with disappointment.
Look at Kevin. He is only 1 year older than you, but he has achieved so much already. Not to mention his performance at the herbalism competition was absolutely incredible. Compared to him, you only know how to spend money on women and get into pointless fights when you're drunk.
Thomas Williams could only let out a long sigh at the end of his rant. Laura stepped forward and said earnestly, "That's enough. Now is not the time to lecture Ethan. Besides, he's right. You have to come up with a way to protect our family. Why don't we all sell all of our properties and leave New York before Kevin comes back for revenge? We can always find another place to live a comfortable life, somewhere he can never find us." Ever since she started to develop and train her own power base, she had gradually realized just how strong a powerful expert could be compared to ordinary people. Even someone like her who had made steps toward increasing her power base was nothing in comparison to Kevin's fast rise to power as an herbalist and in business. With this in mind, the most terrifying thing for her was that Kevin seemed to be on his way to becoming one of the most powerful experts ever, at an extremely fast rate of development. And should he decide to use those powers for revenge against his family, it would mean the end of her life as she knew it. Wondering why Thomas was so calm about Kevin's victory in the competition, Laura and Ethan worried that Kevin would one day seek revenge on the Williams family. Ethan then urged his father to come up with a way to escape this fate, but Thomas slapped him hard across the face and scolded his son for being a disappointment. Afraid that Kevin would become one of the most powerful herbalists ever, Laura suggested that they sell all of their properties in New York and move someplace where he would never be able to find them. At the moment, the Williams family was indeed the most powerful family in New York City, especially after the family started to develop their own power bases. This made their status unshakable compared to the other wealthy and powerful families in New York. However, the problem was that the strongest person in the family, Thomas Williams, was only a level 3 expert, a level that Kevin had already surpassed a long time ago. Therefore, if he decided to take revenge, everyone in the Williams family would be like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered.
You want us to leave? Where can we go to hide? Kevin already possesses so much powerful strength. If he was given a certain amount of time to develop further, how much stronger would he become?
A bright light flashed across Thomas Williams's eyes.
Once he reaches the peak of his power, if he really wants to take revenge on us, it will be useless even if we retreat to the other side of the world.
Then what do you think we should do? Don't tell me we should just stay here and wait for death. Laura Williams was extremely depressed. This question had troubled her for a few days. Ever since the Herbalist Society's competition ended, Kevin's name had spread across the entire country like wildfire. By now, almost everyone knew that he was arguably the best herbalist of his generation. In the age of social media, the art of developing one's power base, which had mostly been kept secret in the past, was known to everyone. Given the looming threat of the Pinnacle's arrival, the Healing Art School had even opened branches everywhere to nurture talents among the next generation. Because of this, Kevin's reputation went way beyond the Williams Company's success in Chicago and turned into something that was far greater than what Laura Williams could imagine.
If we want to solve a problem, we need to address its root cause. So I've decided to fly out to D.C. tomorrow to find Kevin and personally apologize to him. I must then convince him to return to the Williams family, even if it means getting down on my knees to beg and giving him everything that we currently have.
Thomas spoke very sincerely and firmly. It was as if he had just said something completely ordinary. Ethan Williams, who was still lying on the floor and holding his cheek, was stunned to hear this. Similarly, Laura only regained her senses after a long pause. Thomas, are you crazy? Do you want to invite Kevin back to the Williams family? Have you forgotten how much effort we put in to obtain all of this? Now you want us to simply hand all of this over just like that? There's absolutely no way I'm agreeing to this. Laura almost lost control and threw a tantrum.
Have you forgotten all the treacherous things that we did to Kevin? What other options do we realistically have other than trying to get him to come back into the fold? I already said that I've decided to bring Kevin back. My decision is final, and none of you can change that.
Thomas waved his hand forcefully.
As for what we have done, of course, I remember it. It's precisely because I realized all of our wrongdoings that I'm asking him to come back. Even if I still end up dying in his hands, at least I'll have no regrets.
You're crazy, Thomas. You've really gone mad this time. If you dare to bring Kevin back, I will smash my head against the wall until I die. Do you not believe me? Laura was so angry with him that her whole body trembled.
That's your problem. At the end of the day, I am still the patriarch of the Williams family. No one can stop me from doing anything.
After saying this, Thomas quickly walked out of the study. Did Thomas Williams really mean what he said? It could only be said that Laura Williams's eyes were dripping with so much fear that she couldn't see her husband's true intentions. As the saying goes, fortune comes from danger. Kevin's exceptional talents and skills had already been fully revealed to Thomas Williams. Under the education of the Healing Arts School and guidance from various powerful organizations in Washington, D.C., he would definitely be able to achieve great things as one of the most elite experts ever in the future. Although the Williams family wasn't necessarily comparable to any of those influential political families in the capital, they still held a certain status within New York City. However, if they wanted to ensure their survival in such a complicated society moving forward, there must be one person in their family who could fight off any challengers. While Kevin's return to the Williams family would most likely mean that Thomas would lose everything he had now, the future of his family would be secured. Moreover, Kevin's presence would surely bring them unprecedented benefits, including to his own power base. A day's time passed very quickly. With Dalton Steele and Rachel accompanying her, Lily had just returned from the hospital to the Salix Leaf complex when someone came to visit her.
"What are you doing here? You are not welcome here, so hurry up and get lost."
Dalton Steele stood at the door with his arms crossed, staring coldly at the man in front of him. The newcomer was none other than Thomas Williams, who had just rushed over from New York City. He originally wanted to fly directly to Washington, D.C., but before he left, he suddenly remembered that Kevin was not alone. As Thomas knew from years in business, if you want to work well and succeed, both sides must first see the benefit of working together. The relationship between the Williams family and Kevin was not solid. If he wanted to convince Kevin to come back into their family, he would have to do something that would show that he was sincere about ending their conflict. Therefore, he sent people to inquire about Lily's whereabouts and flew to Chicago as soon as he found out where to find her.
"Mr. Steele, please don't misunderstand. I'm only here today to see Lily as Kevin's uncle. I heard that my nephew's wife had just been discharged from the hospital." "You don't have to worry about that. Don't think I don't know what you are thinking. Seeing that my brother is doing quite well now in D.C., you wanted to come here to win some favor with his wife. I'm afraid that your strategy won't work and he will still destroy your family in due time."
Dalton interrupted Thomas Williams and said coldly. He stepped forward and added,
"Now you know fear all of a sudden? What changed? Isn't the Williams family known as the most prominent family in New York City? Where did your arrogance toward my brother go?"
Dalton Steele's words had no mercy. Every snide remark he said was deliberately aimed at Thomas, hoping to draw out his true colors. On the other hand, Thomas Williams only slightly gritted his teeth. Dalton's words were indeed correct, and he did not intend to refute anything nor defend his past actions. After all, for someone in his current position, this kind of thing wasn't something that could be put aside and ignored. To put it bluntly, it was no different from bullying the weak and fearing the strong. At the same time, the argument at the door also caused Lily to worry. Rachel helped her sit on the sofa first before rushing to the door. "Mr. Williams?" Rachel called out in surprise. Ever since she became one of the most powerful women in Chicago, Rachel had been doing business with people from the Williams family. After all, the Williams family was the most powerful family in New York, and Thomas Williams was someone who would be featured occasionally in the news. Rachel knew that having both Kevin and his uncle on her side would only benefit her in the future, even if pleasing both was walking a difficult path.
"Hello, Miss Collins,"
Thomas replied with a smile. On the way here, he also asked his people to find out everything about Lily and the people around her. Because of this, he knew that Rachel was Lily's best friend and one of Kevin's closest business associates. "Please, come in." Rachel pushed Dalton Steele to the side and glared at him. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry. Dalton is really the straightforward type. Sometimes he doesn't think before he speaks. Don't take it to heart." Dalton wanted to stop Thomas Williams from entering the apartment, but before he could do anything, Rachel stepped on his foot and told him not to say or do anything without thinking first. As soon as she saw Thomas, Lily stood up from the sofa. "Uncle, Mr. Williams, what are you doing here?" Lily originally wanted to call him uncle, but when she remembered what had previously happened between them, she was no longer sure what to call him.
"Don't worry, Lily. I'm here today as Kevin's uncle. No matter what happened in the past, at the end of the day, we are still a family,"
Thomas uttered seriously.
"With that, I am deeply sorry for what I have done to you and your mother.
Even Thomas had to wonder if his false sincerity was going to fool Lily into believing that he had rushed to see her out of genuine concern. Accompanied by Rachel and Dalton Steele, Lily had just returned to the Salix Leaf complex from the hospital when Thomas Williams showed up at the door. Thinking that Thomas was up to no good and was just using this to win favor with Kevin, Dalton refused to let him in, but Rachel, who had business dealings with Thomas, overruled Dalton. However, given their previous encounter, Lily was quite unsure of what to make of his visit as Thomas suddenly apologized for what he did to her and her mother in the past. Lily and Dalton were stunned when they heard Thomas Williams's words. The reason why Rachel seemed unaffected by this was because she didn't participate in the fight against the Williams family. Beyond the Salix Leaf Hotel's working relationship with them in New York, she didn't know what Thomas Williams had done to Kevin and the others. However, Dalton and Lily were different. Both of them had been captured by the Williams family in the past. Moreover, in Dalton's case, the entire Steele family had been ambushed and humiliated by the people of the Union in the Williams mansion. If it wasn't for the timely arrival of Kevin, Spencer, and the others, his surviving family members wouldn't have been able to see the light of day. Because of this, they were certainly shocked by Thomas Williams's words. Was the Williams family really familiar with the word apology? And was Thomas truly sincere in using it today? Dalton took a deep breath and stared hard at Thomas.
What exactly do you want? Have you forgotten what the Williams family has done to Lily and my family? Do you think a simple apology is enough to wipe the slate clean between us? You're right, but no one can change what happened in the past. So we have to move forward. After all, people will always live in the present, and Kevin is still a member of the Williams family,
Thomas calmly responded.
Wasn't he banished from the Williams family a few years ago?
Dalton crossed his arms in front of his chest and raised his eyebrows.
That's true, but he still has the blood of the Williams family flowing through his veins. No matter how you look at it, you can't deny that this is an unchangeable fact,
Thomas replied indifferently.
Besides, it's not necessarily a bad thing for young people to experience certain hardships in order to build their character. I really don't know where you got your nerve from.
Dalton brushed him off coldly.
All right, Mr. Steele. I know you still have a lot to say, but I'm not here to discuss the past with you. The reason I flew out to Chicago was to see my nephew's wife.
Thomas turned to look at Lily, who had yet to recover from her shock.
Lily, please forgive our family's behavior toward you and Kevin in the past. I hope you don't let some trivial matters get in the way of a happy family relationship between us moving forward.
When Lily didn't respond to Thomas Williams after a long time, Rachel tapped her shoulder a few times, and only then did Lily recover from her daze. There are some things that I cannot make a decision on. This matter is between you and Kevin. As for the forgiveness you mentioned, Lily bit her lip and didn't know how to continue. Since Kevin was in Washington, D.C., she didn't feel comfortable deciding on his behalf, especially since his conflict with the Williams family started even before they had met. So whether they were considered enemies or family, it was really hard to say right now. Lily, what are you talking about? You and Kevin are husband and wife, so you can naturally speak for both of you. Besides, Kevin and Mr. Williams are family, so how could there really be any lasting bad blood between them? When he returns from D.C., you should all sit down and have a good chat. Won't it be for the best to put this all behind you? Rachel cleverly tried to smooth things over to ease the awkward atmosphere between the two of them. Upon hearing this, Dalton snorted and turned his head to the side. If it weren't for Lily, he would have thrown Thomas Williams out of this place like a pile of garbage a long time ago. Back in Herbalist City, Kevin's injuries had mostly recovered after a few days of recuperation. During this period of time, Vincent Reeves had even brought Larry Barnes to visit him several times, treating him like his own son by constantly checking up on him. This time, the matter of the 5-colored lightning reminded Kevin of something. No matter how tempting it was, he must not casually attempt to take or refine any high-grade pills before he had sufficient strength to do so. However, perhaps this matter was not such a bad thing. Kevin was surprised to find that the spiritual energy in his body had not only cured him of the lightning's debilitating effects, but also allowed him to gain a basic understanding of how to utilize its power. Since Kevin had healed enough to no longer be bedridden, he now followed Vincent Reeves all the way to the highest point in Herbalist City, where there stood a tall structure that looked like a tower. It had a view of the entire city below, which showed that the chairman was an unreachable figure to the rest of the Herbalist Society. His position was something that no one else could hope to reach. "Is this the place where the chairman lives?" Kevin raised his head and looked at the tower not far away from them. As soon as they arrived at the highest point, Kevin suddenly felt something different. The spiritual energy here seemed to be much denser compared to other places within Herbalist City.
That's right. This is the most heavily guarded place in Herbalist City.
Vincent Reeves replied with a faint smile, but a complicated expression flashed across his eyes at the same time. The chairman, whose power base is beyond anyone else's, still needs protection? I think he must be really afraid of death. Kevin smiled and shook his head.
Be careful of what you say in the most important place of the Herbalist Society.
Vincent hurriedly covered Kevin's mouth with his hand and looked around vigilantly.
This place might not look that special, but there are 4 experts with power bases at the 6th to the 8th stage of level 5 guarding this tower. If they hear that you are being disrespectful to the chairman, they might give you a lot of trouble.
4 level 5 experts? Do experts of that caliber grow on trees here nowadays? Why do I feel like they are everywhere in DC? Kevin gasped in shock. However, he didn't refute Vincent Reeves' words. While he was concocting the Great 5 Elemental pill during the finals of the competition, he had already discovered that the chairman was highly revered by all of the members of the Herbalist Society. Vincent Reeves did not say anything else as he straightened his clothes and brought Kevin slowly inside the tower. Once they entered, Vincent warned Kevin not to walk around aimlessly. He had to follow in his footsteps exactly and not make a step anywhere outside Vincent's path. Kevin understood and followed Vincent Reeves carefully as he looked around his surroundings, only stopping when they reached the 4th floor. Along the way, he noticed something peculiar. Every floor had a different amount of spiritual energy, and each one required a special technique to access.
The chairman is in this room. You can go in by yourself.
Vincent Reeves quickly tapped on the black door a few times using a specific rhythmic pattern. Right after, Kevin only heard a series of crisp sounds as the door gently opened a crack for him. After that, Vincent Reeves quietly walked backward and gestured for him to enter. Kevin looked at him and nodded, then pushed the door open slightly as he entered. Suddenly, he was greeted by a blinding light that made him instinctively close his eyes and retreat to the door. Only then did he realize that the door had been closed again, which meant that he couldn't leave until someone who knew the secret technique would let him out. When he finally reopened his eyes, he could see that there was only a small coffee table inside the room. On both sides of it, there were 2 green chairs, and the chairman was sitting on one of them while drinking coffee.
Now that you're here, take a seat. After all, you're not an outsider to me.
The chairman glanced at Kevin and poured him a cup of coffee.
Have a taste of the new coffee that just arrived yesterday.
Why would such a powerful person like the chairman care about things as simple as a cup of coffee? Kevin thought to himself as he sat down casually. He glanced at the coffee in the cup and then looked up at the chairman. Deep down, when Vincent Reeves told him to enter the room and meet the chairman alone, Kevin's heart was filled with anxiety. Prior to entering Herbalist City, his relationship with the Herbalist Society wasn't good, and he was now on their territory. Given that the chairman seemed to possess limitless strength, if he wanted to seize any pill formula from him, Kevin wouldn't be able to do anything about it. If this happened, Kevin knew that he couldn't blame anyone else for his situation. As the saying goes, only the strong survive, while the weak were always next on the chopping block. When Kevin had mostly recovered from his injuries, he followed Vincent Reeves to the highest point in Herbalist City, a heavily guarded tower where Kevin was to meet with the chairman alone. Soon after he entered, the door behind him was closed using a secret technique. After the chairman called him over for some coffee, Kevin had no choice but to approach. Despite being told that he wasn't an outsider to him, Kevin remained unsure about the chairman's motives given his seemingly boundless strength.
Kevin, don't be nervous. I just said that you're not an outsider to me. In fact, you and I are practically like family, so of course, I won't do anything to hurt you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to explain myself to our mentor.
The chairman said with a smile as he slowly raised his head to gaze at Kevin. Although his tone was calm, it caused a huge storm in Kevin's heart. You are... Kevin stammered as he felt his mind go blank as he stared in shock at the chairman. The cup of coffee that he had just picked up slipped back onto the table, splashing its contents all over it.
Why are you so shocked? It looks like the Night King didn't tell you about my existence.
A strange look flashed across the chairman's eyes as he gently put down his own cup of coffee. He then crossed his arms and continued.
In that case, let me introduce myself. My name is Earl Mathis. As a young man several decades ago, I studied for 20 years under the Night King's mentorship. Maybe he didn't mention me because I was the most useless student under his tutelage. After so many years, I only managed to create the Herbalist Society.
Kevin narrowed his eyes and fixed his gaze on Earl Mathis. From his words, he quickly came to a few conclusions. The first thing was that the Night King didn't only have 2 students. This meant that there were others out there who had also been mentored by him. Aside from this, there was also another thing that surprised him. Earl Mathis claimed to be the most useless student of the Night King. However, wasn't the Herbalist Society one of the top organizations in the country? Kevin had heard from others, including Vincent Reeves, that even the people from the upper realm had to respect the Herbalist Society as one of its 4 major powers. Because of this, Kevin really couldn't figure out what kind of people the Night King's other students were. Could some of them also be in Washington? Whoever they were, Kevin was curious to meet them and find out more about this path that he had taken, as well as their secretive mentor.
Kevin, there's no need to be so surprised. The Night King has had many students, and even I haven't heard any news about their whereabouts of the others for many years. If the Night King didn't inform me that you would be coming to Washington, D.C. about a month ago, I wouldn't have known anything about it.
Earl Mathis said in a low, serious voice as he played with the ring on his finger. So, should I still address you as the Herbalist Society's chairman? Kevin finally managed to suppress the shock in his heart and asked with a slight frown.
Since it's just the 2 of us here, you can simply call me Earl. Don't let my old age or title get in the way. I consider fellow students of the Night King as part of the same brotherhood.
Earl laughed lightly and continued.
By the way, Kevin, now that you've used the Herbalist Society's competition as a springboard to make a name for yourself across the entire country, I would like to ask you what you plan to do next.
Kevin sighed when he heard this. Honestly, I don't know what to do yet. Back then, the Night King only told me to come to the capital." Earl Mathis wasn't in a hurry to hear his answer. Instead, he lowered his eyes and looked at the coffee in the cup. After a while, he spoke.
"It seems that the Night King wants you to break out into this world by yourself. As someone who has been in your position and experienced this before, let me give you some advice. Although you have gained a lot of fame and fortune on the path of herbalism, it is not a suitable path for you to walk to the end. The higher the grade of a pill, the more powerful the lightning you'll attract. This means that it will also take a greater toll on your body, and once it hurts your foundation, if you want to advance your power base, then it will be as difficult as flying in the sky like a bird with clipped wings, which we both know is virtually impossible to do. Therefore, I will suggest a different path for you. You can still treat pill refining as something that you do on the side, but you must focus on increasing your power base and use the shortest amount of time possible to nurture a force that belongs solely to you here in Washington. This is the best way for you to obtain the qualifications to enter the upper realm. Anyway, you're still young. It's too early to stop developing your strength just because of some small profits."
Earl finally finished expressing his thoughts. "I have a question. Is the upper realm simply a distinction that's given based on strength, or is there some sort of battlefield that you have to prove yourself on?" Kevin asked seriously. It was not the first time he had heard the words upper realm, but he had never been able to figure out whether it was just a title or an actual place.
"It's normal for you to have this question. The upper realm represents the most powerful experts and organizations in our country, and there is a specific place where all of its members gather,"
Earl patiently explained.
"You should understand that while the government would not actually ask about our matters, they do hate those who see themselves as above the law and swiftly suppress anyone who is caught abusing their power. After all, the strength and abilities of experts are incomparable with ordinary people. So in order to ease any concerns while being free to develop our strength to its potential, we might as well find a place where we can hide from the public eye."
He then added,
"The upper realm is about 2 hours' drive from the west end of Washington, D.C. At the peak of the country's expert scene, only forces who are considered as real giants can enter it."
"Since a 2-hour drive is still relatively close to the city, aren't you afraid that ordinary people will accidentally stumble upon it?" Kevin asked again, puzzled.
"Definitely not. There is a barrier that protects the upper realm, allowing it to be somewhat hidden in plain sight. Moreover, there is only one entrance that cannot be accessed by just any outsider. Beyond ordinary people, even level 7 warriors would not be able to break the barrier and force their way inside."
Earl reassured him with certainty.
"Anyway, the upper realm can be said to be a place beyond anyone's imagination. Anyone who isn't a top-level expert should stay away from it. At the same time, its secret existence is also meant to protect the safety and interest of both the capital and ordinary citizens."
"What do you mean? Does everyone in the upper realm have an official rank in the government as well?" Kevin asked subconsciously. What Earl Mathis said about the upper realm was something that he had never heard of from anyone else before, and he wanted to use this opportunity to learn more about it.
"No. Experts like us usually don't like to hold official positions in the government. Similarly, the government doesn't have that many official positions for them either. Despite this, you have to remember that the existence of any powerful force is dependent on the government's consent. Besides, every man is responsible for the rise and fall of the world. So if you can't perform that duty, it doesn't matter whether the government keeps you or not, as you shouldn't even exist in the first place."
Earl casually responded, Then, is there any rule about entering and leaving the upper realm? Kevin didn't refute Earl Mathis's words.
Of course there is. As the peak of the country's expert scene, one's own power base is the most important prerequisite. So, unless you're a member of an inner family or organization in the upper realm, it's impossible to enter unless one has reached a level 5 power base.
Earl seemed to have just thought of something and continued.
By the way, the headquarters of the Secluded Valley is also located inside the upper realm.
Kevin almost spat out the coffee in his mouth when he heard this.
So Kevin, if you want to settle this grudge with them, you must train not just to enter the upper realm, but to become the most powerful force in it. However, you might need to work hard on this goal for more than 10 years, if not decades,
Earl advised. Earl, I have one last question. Since you know that the path of herbalism is getting harder and harder to sustain the further you go, why didn't you ever stop and change your path? You may use your age as an excuse now, but you should have had a chance when you were younger, right? Kevin suddenly revealed a strange smile as he asked this pointed question to Earl. He was not a fool to simply believe whatever Earl Mathis told him. The Herbalist Society seemed to only be growing stronger and stronger. However, Earl also said that he wouldn't be able to refine pills for long. Wasn't this admission like a slap to his own face? And if it was indeed true, what would it mean for the rest of the organization that he created? Earl Mathis squinted his eyes and gave Kevin a deep look. He couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Earl Mathis had by no means underestimated the power and talents of this young man, who could see through to the truth more quickly than any he had ever met. When the chairman Earl Mathis revealed that he had also been mentored by the Night King in the past, Kevin was surprised. Earl discouraged him from pursuing herbalism like him and advised that he should focus on increasing his power base instead, in order to become the most powerful force among the Upper Realms giants, which he revealed also included the Secluded Valley. Despite this, Kevin wondered why Earl deemed herbalism as an unsustainable path, given that the Herbalist Society was a powerful organization.
While the Herbalist Society has existed for many years, don't judge it by its looks. It's almost at the end of its life,
Earl stated. Kevin knew that these words had a deeper meaning. Kevin thought of several points that he wanted to ask, but he just opened his mouth and didn't know where to start. Earl Mathis seemed to have seen through his thoughts and took the initiative to explain further.
Since we're like brothers, given the fact that we share a mentor, I can tell you the truth. Other than the top herbalists, most of the people who walk this same path can only remain in the shadows for the rest of their lives. Now that the amount of spiritual energy in the world is diminishing, it's becoming more and more difficult for experts to increase their strength. So when they have no other choice, the only way for them to increase their power base is to consume high-grade medicinal pills.
Earl continued.
But now, there is a common problem in front of all herbalists. For example, in order to refine a grade 7 medicinal pill, most of the ingredients needed must be at least several hundred years old in order for its medicinal properties to be potent enough to refine. Some of the special herbs may even have to be over 1,000 years old. But how easy do you think it is to find medicinal ingredients in the world that are suitable enough to meet this kind of condition? And it's possible these medicinal ingredients have been wasted due to pill refinement failure. No matter how ordinary a medicinal pill is, the medicinal ingredients required need enough time to grow before they can be extracted for use. So unless there's a way to accelerate this process, this shortage of ripe herbs will hold back the extent to which higher-level herbalists are able to further increase their own power base. After all, the higher the grade of a medicinal pill, the higher the power base an herbalist must have in order to successfully refine it. However, without a sufficient source of spiritual energy to aid in their development, it is easier said than done to ensure the future of the Herbalist Society.
Upon hearing this, Kevin simply couldn't find any rebuttals. Everything that Earl said was the truth. Kevin had always thought that his words were good enough to persuade or even fool anyone. Today, he finally knew what it meant to possibly be on the receiving end of such skill. In order to avoid a threat and secure one's place in the upper realm, it was easy to say something that others thought to be reasonable enough to the point of making them accept it as truth. So Kevin couldn't afford to let his guard down. "Do you mean that herbalists are destined to wither away in the future?" Kevin casually asked.
"I'm not saying that herbalists will completely fade into obscurity. It's just that the opportunities for them will become more and more scarce. It's precisely because of this that you should temporarily give up on this path. Otherwise, you'll only waste your youthful potential on a pointless quest."
The more Earl Mathis spoke, the more impassioned he became.
"I didn't see this back then, but now that I've realized it, it's already too late for me. However, I really don't want you to suffer the same fate, so I hope that you learn from my mistake."
Kevin almost believed what he said, so after witnessing enough of Earl's lecture, he quickly changed the topic. "Earl, I have another question. Since you said that the upper realm is so strong, are the power bases of all the experts there really at level 5 and above? According to what I know, there are only a handful of level 7 warriors in existence," Kevin said as he wiped the sweat off his forehead.
"Your foresight is too shallow. Who told you that the limit of your power base is level 7?
Earl responded as if it was common knowledge. This made Kevin almost jump up from his seat. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Earl Mathis. "What do you mean by that? Are there really experts whose power base is above level 7? Kevin asked as he gulped.
"Of course."
Earl nodded his head and continued.
"The next step upon breaking through as a level 7 expert is to reach the final stage of that level. However, while that marks the end of a regular expert's journey, every generation usually has a remarkable talent who is able to further increase their strength to become a Grandmaster with an almost infinite power base. However, Grandmasters in particular have not appeared for many years."
Kevin was stunned to find out about this. His eyes were glazed over as he thought about what this revelation meant. Earl's words opened the door to a new world of possibilities for him. From the beginning of his journey as an expert until now, Kevin initially thought that he was soon about to reach the peak of his powers. However, it turned out that he was only just about to scratch the surface of his potential.
Although there are currently no Grandmasters that are known to still be alive, there are still a handful of powerful masters in the world, such as the patriarchs of the 5 major families in the upper realm. As for our mentor, I have no idea what level his power base is. After all, the Night King hasn't fought in many years, and he is hidden from the public eye very well.
Earl explained as he took a sip of coffee before continuing.
If you want to raise your power base to the highest level possible, you must go to the upper realm.
Earl, since we're like brothers, let me ask you something that I hope you don't take offense to. What level is your power base? He urgently wanted to know how his strength could compare with him. Only then could he gauge how much further he had to go.
I'm ashamed to let you know that there's actually been a bottleneck that has troubled me for many years. I managed to break through to level 7 a while back, but at my age, unless there's a very good opportunity, I'm afraid it's impossible for me to take another step forward.
Earl revealed with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. However, Kevin couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Fortunately, Earl Mathis was also one of the Night King's students. Otherwise, if he had chosen to confront the Herbalist Society's chairman head-on, he would have already died without leaving a trace. When Kevin had finally calmed down after much effort, he spoke once again. "Thank you for your advice. After I have established my own power in Washington, D.C., I will definitely go to the upper realm and prove myself worthy of being at the top."
If you encounter any difficulties in Washington, feel free to ask for my help. As the saying goes, an older brother is like a second father. Since the Night King isn't here, it is my duty to take care of you for him.
Earl told him sincerely. Kevin nodded his head earnestly. After that, he then asked Earl Mathis all about the distribution of power in Washington as half a day passed very quickly. Although Kevin had spent the past few days peacefully in Herbalist City, His conflict with the Kessler family had reached its climax back in the heart of Washington, D.C. With the Reaper Squad stepping in to help Kevin, the Kessler family's strength had been greatly reduced. Luckily, Raymond Kessler had made many friends and connections in the government over the years, which prevented their family from crumbling to pieces in just a matter of days. On top of this, it had already been very difficult for the Kessler Corporation to fend off the Orion Group when the KWTD Corporation suddenly came out of nowhere to join in the middle of the fight against them. This suddenly placed the Kessler Corporation in a precarious situation. Watching two of the country's leading companies working together to deal with a common enemy, even companies with tens of billions of dollars worth of resources wouldn't dare to follow in the Kessler Corporation's footsteps. They were too afraid that if they weren't careful and did something to provoke the two corporate giants, they would be next on the chopping block. Given this, many people with discerning eyes could also sense what had happened. Although no one knew the exact cause of the KWTD Corporation, the Orion Group, and the Reaper Squad's conflict against them, they could vaguely feel that the Kessler family, which had been entrenched in the capital for many years, might have brought this disaster upon themselves. Meanwhile, back in the Swinton family's mansion in St. Louis, Alan and Susan Williams were sitting in the courtyard and drinking coffee. Ever since they moved here, the couple hadn't caused much trouble for the Swintons. With regard to their safety, they were protected by a group of bodyguards that Kevin had specifically selected from the Radiants. At the same time, the people of the Swinton family cared about them so much, and they did everything they could to make sure that the couple was comfortable. After all, it was the least they could do after everything Kevin had done for them. Relying on the Radiants' presence in the city, as well as the close relationship between the Thompson family and Kevin, the Swinton family had unquestionably become the most powerful family in St. Louis ever since the Huxley family had been destroyed. Alan, what do you think about Kevin being alone in D.C.? Will anyone bully him over there? Susan Williams asked her husband worriedly. Don't worry. Kevin is a sensible kid. I'm sure he knows the severity of everything in the capital, so he won't do anything too excessive. Alan Williams put down the cup of coffee in his hand and hesitated for a while before adding, By the way, I also heard from Richard that Dorothy and Lily haven't been living in the same place for some time. However, not long after that, Lily became the target of a group of assassins because of Kevin, and she was just discharged from the hospital recently. No matter what, Lily is our daughter-in-law. Shouldn't we go back and see her? Susan asked. She was genuinely concerned. As long as Dorothy isn't around, it should be fine for us to pay her a visit. Lily has also had a hard life. Not only did she have a despicable mother who constantly tried to sabotage their marriage, but just as Dorothy was finally out of the picture, Kevin had to leave Lily all alone in Chicago due to his mission in Washington, D.C. With the two of them not spending much time together these days, I wonder how long it will take for us to have a grandchild. While the couple was talking, Richard Swinton hurriedly walked into the courtyard. After hesitating for a moment, he slowly called out,
Alan, someone is looking for you.
Who is it? I don't know many people in St. Louis, Alan stated in confusion.
It's your younger brother, Thomas,
Richard revealed in a flat tone.
What is he doing here? Ask your staff members to send him away immediately.
Susan's expression immediately became sour as soon as she found out who had come to visit. Back then, she had witnessed how the rest of the Williams family treated her husband. If it wasn't for Kevin's timely arrival, who knows if they would still be alive today, especially Ellen, who was almost angered to death by Thomas's wife, Laura. Because of this, Susan Williams was filled with deep resentment towards the members of the Williams family.
What do you think, Alan? If you agree, I will immediately have your brother sent away.
Richard didn't hesitate to reassure the two of them. Alan frowned and thought for a moment, but in the end he still shook his head. It's fine, Richard. I will go and see him. No matter how much they had offended him in the past, in Alan's heart he had always regarded himself as a member of the Williams family. Blood is thicker than water, and this was something that could never be changed. More than 1,000 miles away from St. Louis, wild animals' roars could be heard in a dense forest between the mountains. While this was originally a place where people were rarely seen, if someone were to observe carefully from the sky right now, they would definitely notice a large number of people moving in the woods. As the war with the Myriads had begun, The Alliance leader left 3,000 men to guard their headquarters, and most of them were only level 2 warriors. After all, the Myriad's forces were at least as powerful as them, so the Alliance had to send out all of its elite experts to fight against them. Because of this, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the Alliance's headquarters had almost been reduced to an empty shell. If the righteous schools of the great powers knew about this, they could send out a small team of experts to destroy their headquarters in one fell swoop. In the back hall, Selena Salem was lying on a sofa. Having lit a scented candle earlier, she felt relaxed by its aroma. "Are you absolutely sure?" Selena Salem was a little excited as she asked the female underling kneeling behind the curtain. "Yes, ma'am. I'm telling the truth." The woman replied respectfully and answered without raising her head. "Messenger Williams won the championship in the herbalism competition that he participated in. It's all over the news." "All right, good job. You will receive your reward soon." Selena waved her hand and sent her subordinate away. No one noticed that behind the layers of silk curtains, Selena Salem's face was full of happiness as she exclaimed, "Kevin, I finally heard some good news about you. I hope to see you soon." Absence had indeed made the heart grow fonder, and Selena had never let Kevin out of her mind or her heart. While Kevin continued to discuss several matters with Earl Mathis in Herbalist City, the Reaper Squad, the Orion Group, and the KWTD Corporation had all taken turns in suppressing the Kessler family. At the same time, Alan and Susan Williams were talking about the recent events surrounding Kevin and Lily when Richard Swinton hurriedly told them that Thomas Williams had arrived. Despite the Williams family's offenses toward him in the past, Alan agreed to see his younger brother. Meanwhile, Selena Salem couldn't contain her excitement and hoped to see Kevin soon after being informed that he had won the herbalism competition. Inside a small diner in Washington, D.C., Stanley Cooper sat in one of the corner booths while leisurely drinking some coffee and enjoying the light music that was playing on the speakers. Suddenly, the door was opened from the outside as Kevin casually walked over to Stanley Cooper and sat opposite him. "Why'd you ask me to meet here?" Kevin looked around the diner before finally fixing his gaze on Stanley Cooper.
"I like the ambiance here. Plus, they always serve good but inexpensive coffee."
Stanley smiled and handed Kevin a cup of coffee that he had ordered ahead of him.
"How about you try it? It's nothing fancy, but I'm sure it will put you in a good mood."
Kevin glanced at the cup of coffee, then tilted his head and looked at him.
"Don't get too nervous with what I'm about to say, all right? We have to take things one step at a time. I managed to gather some clues from the things that you asked me to investigate. However, while digging into the matter, I came across an unexpected hitch and couldn't proceed any further."
Stanley raised his cup of coffee, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath before taking a sip. "Even with the Reaper Squad's resources, there's no way for you to investigate further?" Kevin subconsciously frowned. Before they parted ways the other night, Kevin had asked Stanley Cooper to investigate the relationship between the Kessler family and the Secluded Valley. Since the Kessler family seemed to have hired the Secluded Valley in order to get rid of him, he figured that there must be a way to confirm his suspicions. After all, as long as something between them had happened before, he was sure that no matter how careful the Kessler family was, there would always be traces left behind. Whether it was surveillance footage, phone records, emails, or bank transactions, surely there was something that the Reaper Squad could find, right?
"Don't underestimate the Kessler family. Raymond Kessler is an old fox with decades of experience and vast connections. Do you really think he would leave behind future troubles for his family?"
Stanley opened his eyes again and continued.
"Based on our investigation, the Kessler family is indeed affiliated with the Secluded Valley. However, their conversations and transactions were likely done through the dark web, so there was no way for us to find out more."
"The dark web? What is that?" Kevin asked curiously.
"The dark web is like the hidden black hole of the internet.
Requiring heavily encrypted software to access, it is home to several markets that mediate all kinds of dirty transactions between buyers and sellers of illegal goods and services. Given this, since those who enter typically use anonymous mobile servers, there was no way for us to trace the exact location or find any useful information that could be used as concrete evidence to implicate the Kessler family. Stanley explained in detail. Hearing this, Kevin's expression became more and more unpleasant. Based on what you are saying, does this mean that the Kessler family can escape from the law?
Not exactly. My people have already closely monitored the movements of every member of the Kessler family. As long as you can force any of them to use the dark web to communicate and transact with the secluded valley again, my people will be able to hack their server and steal all the information that we need to press charges against them.
Stanley stood up and patted Kevin's shoulder.
It's time for you to do your part.
Just as Kevin was thinking about all of this, his phone suddenly rang. When he checked who was calling, he saw Olivia Rafferty's name on his phone screen. Kevin hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone. "What's wrong?" "Kevin, my father wants to see you," Olivia Rafferty said in a low voice. "Come to our house immediately. I've already sent my address to your phone." After saying this, Olivia immediately hung up the phone. When the call abruptly ended, Kevin stared at his phone in confusion, not knowing what had just happened. Why was Michael Rafferty looking for him? He did not have any relationship with him. After leaving Stanley Cooper in a hurry, Kevin took a cab and went to the address that Olivia had sent him. When he arrived outside a mansion in the suburbs, the words Rafferty family were written on the gate. The Rafferty family was known for being one of the richest and most influential families in the capital. At that moment, 4 bodyguards were standing outside the mansion scanning their surroundings. Kevin was about to enter the courtyard when he was stopped by someone.
This is the Rafferty family's mansion. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to trespass,
one of the bodyguards told him in a cold voice. "It was Olivia Rafferty who called me here. She said that her father wanted to meet me," Kevin answered politely. After letting her stay with him and spending a lot of time together over the course of the Herbalist Society's competition, Kevin and Olivia could be considered friends. However, this was the first time he had come to her home. If something bad happened right now, it would be hard to avoid a conflict with them.
Both Miss Rafferty and her father have very high status here in D.C. How could they even know someone like you? I think you most likely just want to sneak in and steal something. Am I right?"
The bodyguard felt that he was so great at his job for actually seeing through Kevin's little scheme. Feeling proud of himself, he couldn't help but straighten his back even more, and his voice became several times louder.
"Get the hell out of here! Otherwise, don't blame us for teaching you a lesson."
"Why can't you be more reasonable? Do you really think I'm that kind of person? Besides, you're just a bodyguard here. If you don't want to be in trouble with your bosses later, don't be so blind." Kevin's temper immediately rose. Since this person sized him up and looked down on him, Kevin didn't need to be polite either.
"If you know what's good for you, just leave. The Rafferty family won't allow anyone to be so impudent here."
The bodyguard took a step forward, and a level 3 power base immediately radiated from his body. It was a pity that the aura he emitted was nowhere near Kevin's own. Like melting ice under the blazing sun in the middle of July, his spiritual energy disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, the 4 bodyguards immediately acted as if they were facing a great enemy. They turned their bodies sideways and tensed up, ready to attack Kevin at any moment.
"Who are you?"
The bodyguard's face changed drastically as he asked this in a stern voice. Seeing the panicked look on their faces, Kevin sighed helplessly and waved his hands a few times. He sighed. "I really don't want to fight with you shrimps. Just hurry up and call Olivia out."
You keep saying you want to see Miss Rafferty. I can tell that it's clearly because you have bad intentions.
The bodyguard coldly snorted and turned to the 3 men behind him.
Come on, guys. Let's take him down together.
As soon as these words left his mouth, the other 3 bodyguards rushed towards Kevin. If it was an ordinary person facing level 3 warriors, they would only surrender without putting up a fight. However, it just so happened that the one they were facing right now was Kevin. Before they could even get close to him, not only did Kevin not retreat, but he took a step forward as the pressure of a level 5 warrior instantly burst out from his body. In just a split second, his spiritual energy had stifled these 3 men, causing them to let out muffled groans as they all fell to the ground. Just then, someone called out, "Kevin!" At that moment, Olivia Rafferty appeared at the door. She looked at Kevin with a face full of joy and greeted him. "Why didn't you inform me when you arrived?" "Well, it seems like a person like me isn't qualified to enter your family's home," Kevin replied as he slowly withdrew his pressure. If it wasn't for Olivia's timely arrival, he wouldn't have minded teaching these ignorant people a good lesson.